and you can also use this on-screen panel to ask us questions. Now, we won't answer questions throughout the webinar, but please do send them in as you think of them, and we will have a long Q&A session at the end. During the webinar, we'll also be running a number of polls, and to record your response, please click on the on-screen voting button when asked to do so. After the webinar, we will be providing a recording of the webinar as well as a copy of the slides and a fact sheet to answer all questions, whether we answer them or don't get to answer them during the webinar. So before I hand over to Bill, we'll just do one quick practice poll. So the first question is, how would you describe your level of understanding about the transition and how to transition to the new apprenticeship standards? So the answers are very good, good, poor, or very poor. So please answer now. Okay, thank you. So a good answer, actually. 54% of you are saying that you have a good understanding of how to transition to the new apprenticeship standards. That gives us a good reckoning for the type of detail that we'll go into today. And let's hope that we can get you all up to very good standards. One more quick poll, please, before we hand over to Bill. Just what best describes your job role within your organisation? Tutor, assessor or head of department, vice principal, principal, business development manager, or other. So please answer now. Okay, once again, thank you. Very useful for us to know. Just under 50% of you are heads of department level. So again, useful for us so we know the sorts of content and types of issues that we might need to address with you today. Okay, so thank you all very much. And without further ado, let me hand over to my colleague, the Senior Apprenticeship Manager, Bill Twigg. Over to you, Bill.
Yes, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for affording your time for this City and Guilds webinar. I do hope that the information, advice and any guidance that comes from it is really been a worthwhile time spent by yourselves on this event. What I'd like to do is to quickly just have a review, because for those of you that have followed the series, the last one we had a couple of weeks ago, we actually looked at in some depth the new standard, endpoint assessments, delivery of independent assessment, funding and levy, and basically where we started the position, there was almost a 50% level of good understanding and poor understanding, and hopefully that the event actually gave some further advice and guidance where people felt a lot more refreshed and capable in this area. As far as we know, there are certain changes coming up ahead, which we will be reporting on as they happen, certainly around the levy and any funding by the end of this month, when we start to look at some of the further changes that will be being delivered around funding and the introduction probably SASE and the standards into a single funding framework. So we're anxious to get that information to you and opinions about that going forward. For today, the agenda is basically looking at a process that we've developed over time. We've developed this with you because basically we've done a lot of face-to-face consultation on a one-to-one basis across a number of centres across England, and what we found was that this 8-step approach has really come from the development of looking what practices we're undertaking, from discussions with us and from our own thinking, to be able to, if you like, stimulate the thought of change and provides a very basic framework to be able to drive that change. What I will probably do today is look at the latter steps in a little bit more detail than the earlier steps, because I think the latter steps are the ones that carry the bigger challenges to centres as far as meeting the reforms of apprenticeships and changing with the new types of apprenticeship standards. So let's just have a quick look about looking at the step one of this process. The one thing that I have picked up from everybody is everybody's up for a sprinkling of their apprenticeship business. And this model and starting this particular step really goes back to the grassroots of why you're doing this particular business within the centre. So what we are keen on is to make sure that we have a clear understanding of the market demands, which is basically based on the local skills requirements. Clearly, there are new interfaces now over the last 12 months that have come, everything from the LEPs having a much more broader understanding and leadership role to the new bodies that have been forming where your local funding will come from. But embedded in there are clearly key issues around the type of skills and demands and those that would relate to apprenticeship delivery. Once you have an idea of the type of demand and where we think there is high demand, that is probably a good place to start to look at what you currently do and what potentially you might need to do going forward. And there are other agencies such as sector skills councils and those of you that have stretched your connections and made it to trailblazer groups where you can find some really interesting and valuable information. So what we're basically saying is we need to get down to not just sector but occupational level for areas of activity and what type of delivery models that you would probably need, which may be custom and practice or where you have a history, or looking at the type of new innovation that you'll need to bring to the centre. What I'd like to do now is just hand back to Belinda for another one of those poll questions.
Thank you, Bill. So with regards to the new apprenticeship standards, do you have relationships with any of the following? Your local enterprise partnerships or industrial partnerships, sector skills councils, the Department of Business Innovation and Skills, or trailblazer groups? And please tick all that apply. Great, thank you. So a really good level of engagement that we're seeing with your LEPs and industrial partnerships as well as your sector skills councils. Still a good high number of you, about 38%, have connections with trailblazer groups and 26% with BIS. Back to you, Bill.
Thank you, Belinda. So let's move on to the next slide in the process. Basically, what we're looking for now is if you have done that basic homework and research, is you need to really triangulate your findings. And there's nothing quite like actually talking directly to the customer, the employers. I know that a lot of you have strong links with small businesses, and a lot of your business is based around small businesses. So this is where we have witnessed and supported a number of workshops with providers in talking about the future delivery of skills in the region and meeting the customer's requirements. This also starts to set your strategic direction and understanding of the occupations you need to develop and deliver, and becomes the basis, if you like, for the development of the other 6 steps of this particular process. Belinda, would you give us our next poll, please?
Yes, thanks, Bill. So what are your biggest challenges associated with engaging employers to generate business? It might be employers wanting to centralise their spending, having a sufficiently wide network of employers, having the ability to deliver the range of subjects and levels required by employers, or making your proposition attractive to employers. So please vote now. Okay, so we're laughing in the room here. Not too many surprises there. It's about 60% of you saying making your proposition attractive to employers. And I will just say there's a lot of work that we're going to be doing, helping colleges and providers engage more closely with providers. So we'll brief you on that later on in the webinar. Back to you, Bill.
Thank you very much, Belinda. Right, okay, so if we go to the next slide, basically we're into step 3 of the process, second part of step 2, sorry, in the process. And basically what we think is that you end up really with 3 basic decisions coming from the information that you've gathered. There will be some areas where you want to defend the business and revenue on an apprenticeship basis. You may be looking to grow markets, areas where you feel that you're particularly successful, and that there is a potential for more apprenticeships in this area. Particularly where we are starting to find drivers, like at local government, a certain percentage, about 2.3% of the area of employment, need to be apprentices. So these may be new areas of expansion for you. To actually, those that decide that actually their business going forward may be more loans orientated around delivery of programs or recovery programs, full cost recovery programs, and they may be looking to reduce the delivery on apprenticeships. So what you actually come down is your first decision-making part of the process, and what you would want to be, what you want to do as the basis of your planning going forward. Linda, I believe we have another poll.
Yes, I do. Thank you. So, when do you envisage your college will begin to make strategic decisions and implement change management? It might be that you've already started, or in the next 6 months, in the next 6 to 18 months, or I don't know. So please answer now. Okay, thank you. So again, a good result. Good to see that nearly 40% of you have already started. Around 35% are looking to begin that strategic decision-making process in the next 6 months.
So I guess looking at that poll, the next slide, which we're looking at, is probably quite a useful slide. I love pictures, and I think this one really clarifies it for myself. Is that where a lot of you are still deciding about the type of apprenticeships you're going to go, there are a couple of decisions that you need to make, whether you do apprenticeships already or you're going to enter complete new markets in the apprenticeship world. What we're trying to articulate in this slide is that if you're new to the sector, then basically there may be areas of business you want to do, and there may not be a new standard, so you may enter into the marketplace still with the SASE frameworks. So what we want to do is make sure that people don't devalue or undervalue the SASE frameworks going forward. And then what you need to do as well is where you do get a choice between a new standard or a SASE framework, then basically you have a great opportunity to see if there are any financial or delivery benefits. You actually have a clean slate to be able to make that choice of how you're going to enter that market. There is also some concerns that it's probably easy to say we'll probably do what we know already, which is more about SASE frameworks, we do new standards. There is always a danger that that becomes a false economy if you haven't really considered the first two steps with some candour and some real consideration. What we do know as well is if you deliver in a particular sector and you're looking to continue to do business, so we're into the second part of this process or this flow diagram, then what we need to consider is what is being covered in the new standards, because it's very easy to run these standards off the cliff and not realise that you may be running risks or underperforming financially because there are better opportunities with the new standards. So the first thing to be is to get to make sure that you know what you need to know about the development and what's available in the new standards. Very easy to find out. The website is quite, should be quite well known now, but the department website clearly shows those in development as well as those that are ready for delivery, and keeping track of that's really crucial going forward. The financial, there are significant financial advantages in some of the new standards. For example, level 3 in automotive, which is currently peaking at about 12.4, but some areas get a little bit more with the younger starts and certain regional enhancements. The new standard is worth over 27k, and even with competitive tendering with the providers, you should end up with significant upside in the sorts of products and services you can deliver in certain occupational areas. So it's really important to really know your standards from your SASE frameworks in this instance. If you need to continue with delivering SASE, either because you think it's commercially or the right thing to do, you must be mindful about you do run the risk where we're starting to see the practice of turning off frameworks is that people may be wishing to see in a very short term people switch from one SASE framework to another. We've also had some experiences in digital where we've actually seen some down pricing on the SASE frameworks, which is another lever that we think will be used in a lot of SASE activity to try and drive people to the new standards. Really important to keep abreast of the changing scenarios in this particular area. If we start to look at the next slide, what we've got currently, what we've also been doing is to develop some real basic but fundamental tools into the way that you should start to look at your business. What we've got here is we've got, if you like, Bill Twigg training that's been mapped out, and basically being driven from where I'm starting from SASE frameworks, I started to map out the type of activities where I may have choices to be made going forward. I start to map about the financial differences in delivering it and any particular burdens or new challenges in delivery of the new standards against the old, but it becomes an important mapping tool and actual facilitating tool to be able to move from where your current state is to where you need to move forward. We're using this an awful lot now with centres as a customer aid, and I'm working on several centres looking at their current delivery and helping them to map and how they're going to transpose to the new apprenticeship world. So that's something really to consider going forward if you're not already working in that space. If we carry on, what we're doing is delivering the new standards. The key benchmarks we are starting to see is clearly areas around more funding that are available. You may be able to create a much more competitive and attractive proposition to employers. We also believe that small businesses may be able to, you'll be able to flex your flexibilities for small businesses and get them within the funding remit of the new standards, and that some learners are actually believing that there's benefit in being on the new apprenticeship standards rather than the old being a future-proof prospect from their delivery of their occupation that they're studying for. There is another thing about that, it gives you possibly a new lease of life and to be able to reinvent yourself in the marketplace and provide a competitive edge about your products and services against your competitors. What we have here basically is basically we start to look at what's the effect internally. We did quite a lot on this particular slide in the previous webinar, but I'd just like to touch on it briefly again right now. Basically what we're saying is that you could end up with an on-program delivery which could be qualification based because there are still qualifications required, or there may be an agreement and a suitable qualification available to deliver that program. You could end up really pushing the boat out and producing a bespoke program that you and your employer are totally satisfied, as long as it meets the standards requirements. This is where you could really get into the business of your employers and really try and add value with apprenticeships like never before. Or you could go that extra step, and where you have a bespoke program, you could look for some national or even international accreditation like City and Guilds, who would be happy to evaluate and add that extra value to your proposition. So we just think that this is a really crucial point, and this will drive, as I say, once again, a lot of the other steps going forward about how you have to change as a provider in delivering these new apprenticeships going forward. What I'd like to do is show the diversity of what you're going to have to consider going forward. Once again, I'm calling this Bill Twigg training. I'm a small training provider, but even in my small offering, you can see I'm offering things from property maintenance, motor vehicle, software developer and actuarials. These are all very diverse delivery compared to the more consistent, coherent approach we've been used to on delivering SASE frameworks. This, for me, as a provider, will create new challenges about how we deliver on program, Some are much more challenging and like automotive, where we have gateway stages with on-program, even before we get to the point to end assessment, to ones where we have areas where we are doing things on a much more more established approach that we've had in the past. But what you can see is that the challenge internally, both across departments and within departments, becomes an automatic. There becomes much more of a significant planning and recording capability through the development of the apprentice. This will also be the territory of Ofsted going forward. Even though qualifications may drop out of apprenticeships, like in motor vehicle, you will still be really held to account about the learning experience during on-program. The final gateway that you get between on-program and assessment, I can't emphasise how important it is we get that right first time, because this is where we will be exposing our apprentices and learners to an experience where they have to demonstrate to a third party about they have actually got mastery of the occupation, both in the skill and knowledge capability. So it's a really important area that we need to make sure we get that really right for our young people. What we'd like to do now is just ask for another poll. Over to you, Belinda.
Thank you, Bill. So interestingly, about 40% of you earlier told us that you had started to think about your strategic direction. Would now like to ask, when do you expect to be ready to deliver against any new apprenticeship standards? In the next 6 months, in the next 6 to 18 months, not until funding for SASE frameworks is switched off. You may have already moved to some of the Trailblazer standards, or actually the answer might be we will not deliver any of the new apprenticeship standards. So a few answers there for you to mull over. Please answer now. Okay, so quite a high percentage, around 62% of you are looking to be ready to deliver in the next 6 to 18 months. Only 2% of you have already moved, and 1% saying we won't deliver any new apprenticeship standards. Back to you, Bill.
Thank you very much. We move on to the next slide. Step 5 is about choosing the assessment organisation that's right for you. When I say that it's right for you, the policy clearly states that the employer does have significant say in who it is that they wish to be their end assessment organisation. But we know how much employers work and value the advice of providers. But going forward, those sorts of choices will always be important, particularly in relationship if you have a previous relationship with the on-program of that particular apprenticeship with that organisation, which is ultimately also the end assessment organisation. We actually think there is significant value in the one-stop shop scenario, and we at City Guilds will be working hard to provide that type of service. As far as what the opportunities are to work with, at the bottom of this slide you can see there is a register of apprenticeship end assessment organisations, and it is actually, if you haven't been on it, please click on it after this webinar, because what you can see is the diversity of organisations that are available for any particular standard. It will also show you where there are gaps currently for end assessment organisations, which there is still a significant number. So as we move to the next slide, what we would just like to look at is, in choosing your end assessment organisation, there are also opportunities going forward, and maybe part of your business planning and considerations. We at City and Guilds are looking for partners to deliver end assessment. As far as we can see, we will need a skill base, and we may need some significant resources for those particular hardcore end assessment activities, where we may need garage facilities, kitchen facilities for hospitality and catering, or workshop facilities for areas like property maintenance, so that they can demonstrate their skill base in the end assessment. we are looking to work and have business propositions with partners going forward, everything from finding the right skill base to the right type of resources for end assessment. Step 6. This is quite an important area, and what we do believe is that you really need to do a critical analysis of your current capability and capacity compared to what you need in moving forward. If you've done well in the first 5 stages of planning, you may already be aware of gaping holes in your current capability to be able to deliver the new apprenticeships. It may be areas where you've traditionally relied on qualifications to deliver the on-program type activity, and there is none anymore. So how do you feel confident enough? Do you have the right people to develop the type of delivery plans for learners in the centre, to areas where you may find that your resources to deliver that apprenticeship are lacking because of the new technical requirements within the standard. So this is an important part of measuring where you are and where you need to be going forward. It also may impact when you would switch from current SASE frameworks to new standards, depending upon the level of investment on when you can make that sort of commitment going forward. There's another poll now, over to Belinda.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, so we'd like to know what you perceive to be the biggest challenge associated with developing and delivering a change programme. It could be changing work practices, changing processes and job roles, developing a marketing strategy, investment requirements, or proactive business development and employee engagement. So please vote now. Okay, so majority vote, about 40% view, again, not so surprising, is feels the biggest challenges around employer engagement and business development, likely because of the introduction of the levy and the new role of employers. But we've also got about 30% of you feeling there's a huge challenge around changing processes and job roles. Bill, is there any other comment to make on those results?
No, I think it's, as we're expecting, it certainly is what's being reflected out in the field, working with centres. I think that we at Sitting Guilds are trying to work out how we can support the centres to sort of reflect those requirements going forward. So I think it's a bit about watch this space, and if you're a Sitting Guild centre, be cheeky and come and talk to us, and I'm sure that we'll respond positively to that type of interface interaction. So anyway, we're moving on now to the second point, step 6, which is really where we need to go to market. I found this a particular weak area in the FE sector. One principal said to me that today, it's been a bit like, they will come. It's a bit like the dream of Fields of Dreams. And he said, very much it's been an operating environment where we're known for what we do and people will come. They felt that their marketing area is one of the areas that's needed the most development going forward to try and push the boat out, deliver what's the value proposition is to customers going forward, to make them feel that this is the right solution for them as a customer, what differentiates them from the competitor, both in content and value for money, and any particular unique selling points that they have as a centre of expertise and good track record in these particular occupational areas. So this is an area, once again, as far as the centres that I've been involved with, we've been helping and supporting everything from looking at the type of marketing strategies they could employ to actually running first workshops with employers, with Sitting Guilds in support to try and help them to reach out to the customer base. So step 7 is becoming a real teaser for centres. We've been working once again quite a lot looking at pricing models particularly with the policy within this new apprenticeship approach, where they're asking employers to look for a competitive pricing. It becomes really important to be able to understand and value your product or service that you're going to offer for a particular occupation. One centre said to me, it might be a hard thing to do, but just sometimes we just might have to walk away because we can't afford to subsidise these apprenticeships. And that's a very true scenario, because in the past, where it's been predominantly driven by continuous assessment activities, what we're looking at is a lot more input by providers in the development of the people on programme. And that is a very costly occupation going forward. You must also calculate and understand that end assessment is money that will have to be spent and will come off the top, will be top sliced off the funding that you will have to, as a provider, put aside, because ultimately the apprenticeship cannot be delivered without end assessment. So achieve that end assessment. So these are all things that need to be considered in the pricing models. I've seen various activities around pricing and people even considering, particularly for the smaller employer customer base, is how do the incentives that are currently being paid, do they actually have a significant effect on the approach going forward? I think there's something else we need to be aware of in this particular area, is that when we get this new funding table, where the SASE and the new standards will sit side by side on the one funding approach, I believe we'll probably see the death of payment in kind by employers. I think that we'll have to start looking at employer contribution, a cash flow into the business as providers. So I think all these things play into this particular step going forward. Step 8, what we'd like is basically, are you working with the right type of employers? In the new policy, I think that you've got to be far more aware, and many providers that I spoke to that have said that, you know, employers, the relationship providers with the employers have been significantly around, you know, well, you're going to provide this service for me. What I'm really interested in what comes out of the end. And they've not been, some of the employers have not been proactive, and it's been tough doing business with them. I think if you haven't got the right type of employers in the new policy scenario, I think it gets even tougher, and I actually think that that proposition between you and the employer becomes critical, that it's a good working relationship. They take on their responsibilities about the development of those people on apprenticeships. Because without that, I think it's going to become really difficult to get to a successful end or conclusion to any apprenticeship. The other things to really consider, just as a last point at step 8, here going forward, is that one of the last steps is that you need to consider the type of administrative points and the potential. You need to be flawless in the type of written agreements, which I understand that there are now organisations that are producing first-time strawman type agreements. I think these are things that need to be very robust. The payment schedules, that you can afford the type of money that changes hands that will drive the SFA funding, that you get the right cash flow to be able to deliver these apprenticeships. And also, I'm sure that there may be many employers that will want extras, and it's whether they need to pay for them or they are within the spirit of the apprenticeship that can be delivered. So, going to market is for engagements, and adding value for employers is really crucial, so that your offer stands head and shoulders above everybody else's. So what we would think is that is to actually be able to understand the type of business that the employers engage with, to actually do that step extra and become part of their integral development, education, training, development activity within the business, is probably the direction of travel that you need to go in. And there's so many providers have made that leap, and they're the ones that we're seeing being most productive and successful in the early start around these apprenticeships. So I think it is about, it's not just you buy one off the shelf. We really need to understand what it is that you want and you need, and what we've got on the shelf, is it fit for purpose, and if not, can we make that stretch and deliver something that's really productive for you as a business, and making an apprenticeship a real great opportunity and a great experience for you as the provider to deliver it. So, as we're coming to the end of this presentation and we're getting close to the opening questions, we'd just like to point out that there are some stuff that we're doing currently. So if we hope to see you face to face, we're at the ALT conference where we're going to explore this in a little bit more detail, and we're really going to unpack one of the early standards, particularly around where there's a large on-program content. We're going to unpack the automotive trailblazer around going forward, around vehicle mechanics or vehicle technician, light vehicle technician, and we're going to have, we've got the benefit of having the people that designed this. We'll have Jaguar Land Rover together with some providers that have really made some progress in that, so hopefully we'll look forward to seeing you there at the ALT conference. And we're also going to run workshops in a much more focused approach around the areas that this webinar has covered at the FE Week Festival of Skills. So I think we're sort of in a place to go to questions and answers, and I'll ask Belinda to facilitate this activity.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you to those of you who have submitted questions already. Please do keep them coming, and we will do our very best to get to all of the questions. Just quickly to reiterate that at the end of this webinar, in the next couple of days, we will be sending you copies of all the slides, as well as an FAQ document covering the questions that we've had today. So please keep those questions coming. So the first one that we have received is, have you any information about when the SASE frameworks will be removed when the new standards are approved?
Yes, I mean, as far as we understand, we've witnessed a number of conversations, and a lot of them are looking at about a 3 to 6 months window. Is the sorts of suggestions at the time frames that have been offered, and this is just witnessing conversations at Trailblazer level that we have been supporting. We do know that they've certainly been practicing turning off frameworks, and there's been 2 rounds of frameworks turned off. Most of the frameworks that have been turned off currently are pretty low volume and probably have been pretty low impact to you as a business. But we do anticipate that going forward that some of the larger numbers or larger activity will start to be driven by turning off current SASE capability. But we do anticipate, as I say, a short turnaround on the 3 to 6 months window.
And is there a website to communicate what the changeover dates will be, or how are the SFA communicating that process?
The SFA have already practiced the process, as I said before. They send out communications, and they actually publish lists of frameworks and the time frame in which they can switch off. As I say, if you go to the BIS website, and I believe it's also on the SFA website, there are currently the current 2 rounds of frameworks that are already switched off. That will be the same practice for the 3rd round, and some of those I believe will probably be quite interesting in trying to drive people to the standards.
Thanks, Bill. And a specific question here about automotive. Do we know when automotive will be turned off?
If you're asking for a personal opinion of Bill Twigg, I'll give you one. Based on information that I've sort of picked up and the conversations, I believe that probably early in the new year they'll be looking to turn off the current SASE frameworks, and I think they'll be wanting people to drive to the new standard.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Can providers who deliver specific qualifications also apply to be an end assessment centre?
Yes, the end assessment centre process is open to third parties. We do know that a number of people have applied on the provider scenario. Only 2 have made it so far. I've been involved in 6 or 7 of them, and and only one of those made the end assessment. It's quite a big commitment to become an end assessment organisation. You also have to show clarity that though you're an end assessment organisation, you really can't do it for your own delivery. You need to be doing it for third parties. So there is some complexities. There is certainly opportunity. The way you do that is the application process is on the Bravo system, the SFA Bravo system, and they have deadline dates for applications, I believe, on a monthly basis.
Thank you, Bill. And a little bit here on funding. Is there any news or any updates? Can you give us an explanation of the digital voucher system and the DAS?
Yeah, absolutely. I can say some things. You may already know them, and apologies they're not, but not knowing what you know, I'll just run through quickly what I know, and perhaps that'll help. Basically, of course, the system will come into fruition in April 2017, at the same time the levy payment will go. The system will be open only to the levy paying part of the marketplace going forward, so it's everybody with a payroll in excess of £3 million. The system will not be driving the money. The money will still be driven through the SFA funding system, but there will be connectivity between the DAS system and the current SFA system, which is driven by the provider network. It's a partnership agreement, business agreement between centres and the SFA. But going forward, we know that everybody will be on it probably closer to 2019, so that both the people who pay levy and non-levy payers will actually go forward. Anything else I could tell you quickly? I think those are the main points. I think there are some interesting challenges for the employers and the levy payers. For instance, will be a responsibility of employers to actually inform the tax office that they need to pay this tax and make sure that it's available in their returns. That's an interesting concept. So that employers will need to be up to date with their tax requirements, their tax as far as the levy is concerned. And also, those at the lower end of the levy, it could be going forward that some people will pay levy some months and not other months, because it will be based on a monthly return. And everything will be based on 1/12 of the requirement. And some organisations that have very low pay salary bills throughout the year until it comes to bonus may end up having to pay an awful lot of money towards the end of the financial year rather than pay on a regularly stated process. All those represent challenges because the levy system will drive what you can draw down from each employer, and no levy account can go overdrawn. So there are some still serious concerns and issues to be thought through on that particular approach.
Okay, thank you, Bill. The person who asked that question, if there's anything else, then please do send it in to me and we'll address it. Another question, slightly on funding here. When the SASE framework is switched off, is that when the funding will be given to the employer?
No, not necessarily. We think that when we move over to transition, we think that levy payers will be able to use their money on SASE frameworks if they exist, as well as the new standards. So no, I don't think that they are intrinsically connected in that particular way. I think that the issue will be is where you have duplication of cover, how long that duplication will be permitted by the SFA as far as continue to fund the old SASE framework.
Okay, thank you. So a question here from a delegate who says she specifically delivers administration and customer service SASE frameworks, mainly to SMEs. Is there any indication as to what centres should do if there are no standards written?
Yeah, I think this is quite an interesting area because we've been used to generic standards which we've been able to apply to many different business scenarios. This particular area is a difficult one, but you've got to try, once again keep track of the new standards that are being developed, because a lot of these administrative type activities are actually popping up within occupational areas or sectors. So we're starting to see an aerospace type administrative role, and we're seeing an automotive administrative role. So you may not actually see a one-for-one replacement in this particular area. There is a generic one coming through currently, and we'll probably commit to that. But there are some areas where there are where there are actually unique administrative type standards, which you may think are duplicated, but they're being focused much more in the business environment in which they're applied. So it's a tough one, but it's one that will need continuous monitoring.
Thank you. And for those who do work with mainly SMEs, is there indication of how SMEs will be funded for both SASE and new standards?
Yeah, the current scenario is that obviously, hey, there will be a small company contribution, or a company contribution will be a small up to that 3 million threshold. The question is, and we're all holding our breath for the end of the month, is will it remain to be a third? And that third will have to be actual real payment into the provider's account for the funding, for the government funding to be released, or whether there'll be a drop on the third and perhaps more sympathetic 10% employer contribution. The other thing that we're waiting for, and once again we're expecting once we come out of PERD and we get past the European vote, is will the current incentives, which is reasonably well loaded against the SME, with the young start and the small company incentives that are available, and the success incentive, is whether they will survive or whether there'll be some change there. So I think that these are things, because where we currently do have small SMEs providers, and they do meet the under 16 to 18, sorry, cohort of apprentices, they're a small company under 50, and they have a successful completion, most of them can more than recover their costs for the apprenticeship in those incentives.
Okay, thank you, Bill. A few questions here about end assessment and the role of assessors. So firstly, will there be changes with EQA visits with centres?
Yeah, I mean, EQA visits will not actually be part of the end assessment process going forward. The end assessment process will be driven by the end assessment organisation, and it's a completely different scenario. So the majority, met all of them, and I do say this with caution because we do get some changes of policy creep where changes do come in, but to date, currently, end assessment will be an independent event from you as a delivery body of the apprenticeship. And that will only be able to be carried out via the actual end assessment organisation that's been recognised through the approval system and is on the register. However, EQAs will have some roles, particularly where qualifications survive for on programme, and they are still very much, if you like, technical certificate or MDQ orientated type qualifications, but that we believe will become a shrinking market going forward.
Okay, thank you. And just, we covered it slightly, but let's just recap. How does a provider or a college become an end assessment centre should they want to, and what are the criteria?
The criteria is quite complex. It's about 40 pages, I think. If you want to become an assessment, once again, you will have to go onto the Bravo system. In our FQAs, I will put the link to the Bravo system. You have to register if you're not already a registered organisation on the Bravo system. The register is open for anyone to actually apply onto, and then basically you have to go through a rigorous approach, both about financially as you are as an organisation, your stability, to your capability to be able to be an end assessment organisation. But each standard you want to be licensed to be an end assessment organisation for. So you start with one massive application, and if you're successful through the gate on that, then every standard you want to pick up as you go forward, you would have to make a separate application for.
Lovely, thank you. And very interesting one here, actually. What happens if no one wants to be an end test centre for a standard?
Yeah, it's a good one, yeah. I'm waiting for this one as well. And I hark back to many experiences in the past with the SFA and government. When they have a market failure, they have to do something, don't they? So I'm waiting to see what it is they're going to do for any areas, because there are a number of those standards that are already published in the 103 that are ready for delivery, that are really tough ones to pick up as an end assessment organisation, because you won't even potentially recover your development costs for entering the marketplace. So I just think that it's going to be interesting about both how the SFA, how the department, and the New Institute for Apprenticeships, how they're going to respond to what I would call a market failure in these particular areas. I have no answers at the moment, but like you, I wait in anticipation about what they're going to do.
Okay, and a little bit back to the City and Guilds and Assessment Service. What opportunities do City and Guilds feel there may be for partnering up with providers on end assessment, and how might that work?
Well, I think there are some key principles that we're trying to look at right now. We know that we want to work with people going forward. It's not going to be our position to open up, say, a whole range of garages because we want to do end assessment in automotive or in plastering or brickwork or something like that. What we will be doing is, we know there's an enormous amount of capability and capacity, spare capacity out there in the provider network. We'll be looking to want to partner with those organisations going forward. We also need a strong skills space, and we're looking from both engaging with people at a personal level, or one-to-one, or for an organisation that may have spare capability and capacity, and will want to, if you like, hire that out to City and Guilds. They will all become part of our City and Guilds skills register to be able to deliver end assessment. We will be looking to be solely responsible for the end assessment and provide all the infrastructure, development, training, assessment instruments to be able to drive those end assessments. Those centres that we partner with, and we want to make sure that there's only just enough of those, because it'll be a serious partnership where we need to drive demand to our City and Guilds centres. We'll make sure that we'll make sure that we look at it in a very business-like approach. Because if you partner with us, we want you to be successful and have a successful business experience with us in that scenario.
Okay, thank you. Do we know when the new Register of Training Organisations provider list will become available?
It is already available, and once again, I believe it was on one of the previous slides, the connection to that particular website. So if you want to see who's already available, it's a neat little engine. You can search by standard, and then they'll actually generate the list of what end assessment organisations are actually that particular standard area.
Okay, thank you. A couple of questions we received about the gateway to end assessment. Are you able to explain where the responsibilities will lie for signing the apprentice office ready for end assessment, and how that is written up in a contract between the provider and the employer?
Yeah, it's interesting. I can't particularly articulate very well probably the contract element, mainly because we haven't really focused on being an expert in that area. But we do clearly understand the gateway process. And though it comes in many shapes and sizes in each standard, the principles are always the same. An employer has a right to say that their apprentice isn't ready. A provider has a right to say the apprentice isn't ready. What my ambition is to make sure that whatever the evaluation that is undertaken saying they're ready, is we are giving the learner, the apprentice, the best opportunity for success for end assessment in that independent environment. So it probably sounds like I skated around it a bit, but there are just so many requirements in each of the standards. They're going to have to be custom built for each apprenticeship. So, and I think that what we're going to have is we're going to have an experiential learning here about how do we definitely know that the decisions that we're making is the right one for that apprentice. So, and we at City and Guilds will be as transparent and as open as we possibly can to assist in that type of decision making, particularly if they're going to take a City and Guilds endpoint assessment. We would love everyone to be successful.
Thank you. And how many attempts at end assessment can an apprentice have, and what impact might that have on cost?
Right. Well, once again, Depending upon the standard, some standards are stating that they may only get one reset, and there is at least one standard that's been approved with that scenario embedded. There are others that say you can take as many as you like to get through there. Some of them say you have to do a complete end assessment, again, all elements, if there is a multi-element end assessment process. Some say that you can reset the element that you failed, banking the ones that you've been successful with. And ultimately, financially, yes, there'll be a financial burden, because clearly an end assessment will have to be paid for if there's a second time around, either on an element base or a full end assessment activity.
Thank you. We had a survey a bit earlier about the concern around changing processes and job roles. Question here, do you think that the changes will result in mass redundancies within provider QA teams?
It's an interesting question. I'm not really sure about that that's what's going to happen. I think what there is that there will be a significant number of changing roles, and whether the people that are currently employed are transferable, I think that's the issue that needs to be considered and addressed. I think that this will generate, there will be much more focus about on-program and the quality of on-program that's delivered and how that's going to be managed. If it's not a traditional qualification scenario, I think that there's going to be more consideration about how you will demonstrate to Ofsted that you are delivering quality programs, and that will need some level of quality assurance embedded within that. So though it may not be the formalised qualification approach to QA, there will still be a significant need for this type of activity. The economies of scale and how that's delivered will come down to each business and the way that they're going to approach their new apprenticeship.
Thank you. And how will the assessor's role change? Do you think the assessor role in the college will go?
Well, we need to monitor progress. Vocational education has always been driven by an observation or project type based relationship with the assessor making judgments on capability as they go through the program. So I think that there will probably be need for assessment type activity, but I think that there will be a stronger blend with delivery capability as providers step up and support employers in developing and delivering skills on their behalf.
Thank you, Bill. Well, I think that answers all our questions, and that just about takes us up to 4 o'clock. Before I hand back to Bill for final words, I'd just like to remind you all there will be a survey. When the webinar closes, a survey will come up on your screen. Just a couple of questions that will take no more than 30 seconds to answer. We'd be most grateful, and it's very helpful to get your feedback when we come to plan future webinars and events. We do hope to see many of you at the ALP conference on the 27th and 28th of June, and likewise at the Festival of Skills from the 7th to the 9th of July. When we send through the information and slides following the webinar, we will also include links to those events and the workshops that you can come and join us at there. So just back to Bill for final words, and thank you again to you all for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much for choosing to tune in with us rather than the England and Wales match. I hope it's been of significant value to you, and I look forward to seeing as many of you as I can at the ALP conference. Goodbye.